The SJ was my dirty secret, kept away in a shed and not seeing the light of day, gathering dust. So my name's Chris and this is the story of my Suzuki SJ413.
This was my first car. I got it as a project, and my aim at the time, foolishly, was I want to have it on the road as my first car. Never happened. And then when I went away to uni and stuff like that, I wasn't at home to do anything to it. So basically, it sat for years at my parents' house in a shed there. And then when I moved over to Warwickshire, I moved it over with me about 6 months later, with the goal that I was going to get onto it again. And I started doing like a little bit to it, but not much. And then they kind of got abandoned again with like other interesting projects coming up and stuff. So
that's right here.
Yeah.
So you've owned this car now for what, 10, 12 years more?
Probably about 14 years now.
And how many years have you had it on the road?
1 year.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty much 1 year. So from August last year was the first time I got it on the road. But it had been known to me in the family since probably like the late 90s or so, when my granddad had it and I was about 8, 9 or so. In fact, I remember sleeping on the back seat. Now, obviously, that's not possible anymore.
Yeah, because you're what, 6'6" now?
Yeah, exactly. So,
This is the powerhouse of the Suzuki.
Yeah, that's right. So it's got a 1.6 16-valve Suzuki Vitara engine, so it's on injection now. The original was a little 8-valve 1.3 carb, little tiny thing that made about 65 horsepower or so. This probably makes about 100 or so. So it's a little bit of an upgrade.
Fairly substantial, 30% gain in power.
Yeah, exactly. And the main thing is being sort of injection, a little bit longer stroke and everything like that. It's got a bit more low down power and it's very usable power as well. When you're off road as well, the last thing you want is the carb kind of and the fuel tilting away from it, and you end up getting a bit stally on banks and things. Obviously, the injection keeps a nice flow of fuel there as well, so it's always...
Right, so you dropped the engine in over a weekend from the Vitara.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
Well, actually, at this point, it might be kind of fun to take a bit of a tangent to tell you where the engine came from.
Okay.
So this actually dates back to uni. So one of fellow heap racing team members, I guess, Matt Griffiths. We went to uni together. We used to do something called Formula Student, where you build the sort of single-seat race car and you compete with other unis. Well, we'd had a kind of long-standing banter that about the SJ and it not running and things like that.
We all have a project that's just, I have a dirty secret in the workshop next door.
Yeah.
That really needs to go back on the road after 10 years of restoring.
Yeah, and the SJ was my dirty secret, kept away in a shed and not seeing the light of day, gathering dust. And we had we went to Le Mans in 2012, and obviously after a few beers we were having a bit of banter about the SJ and whatnot, and somehow a bet was formed. So at the time,
this is how all good car projects start, right?
They start with and actually the thing was nothing really to do with the Suzuki, but at the time it was kind of the butt of a lot of jokes that I was in uni working on this race car. I didn't even have a driving license at the time, and I was 22, 23, So the bet was made that I couldn't pass my driving test in time for the Le Mans the year after, so 2013. It turns out I did by 1 day.
Amazing.
Achieved, and because of the loss of that bet, Matt had to buy me an engine for the Suzuki. Somehow this transpired. Anyway, Matt being Matt was being difficult, and he decided that I wasn't going to get a nice 8-valve carburettor Vitara engine which would drop straight in. It has 3 wires to put in. He would decide to be difficult and said, no, you're getting the fuel injection with the ECU and millions of wires just to...
It's the best kind of difficult. At least
Yeah.
you got a good engine out of it.
Well, actually, yeah, I'm actually really glad that he did now, because I'd much rather that engine than any carb one. But yeah, at the time it was a bit of a non-annoyance. Anyway, fast forward all the way to 2015, and I was kind of reminded of this bet, and it sort of came to the forefront. I guess because I had the SJ in the barn that we shared then, and we found this Vitara all the way down in Somerset for 290 quid, I think, and it had this 16-valve engine. So we went down there, cheekily offered 270 quid for it, and the guy said yes. And we bought this Vitara, and I drove it all the way back from Somerset at about 50 miles an hour because the prop shaft was vibrating like mad. And just kind of nursed it home and got home at like 1 in the morning.
Isn't it typical that the car you need at the price you want is always the furthest away?
Yeah, always. But yeah, it was it was a car buying adventure, and we
Absolutely.
took in some nice scenery on the way down. But yeah, anyway, so that's how the engine came about, and it got taken out of the Vitara that I think it was that summer, and then again just put to one side, and we'll get around to that at some point. So yeah, it wasn't until Chris came down to stay with me, and we blitzed it and put it in the weekend, and that was kind of the inception of me actually starting to work on the project. The first kind of steps, if you like.
It's great. The gimbal makes it feel nice and smooth in here.
A bit of a bone rattler, really.
Pretty sure the GoPro footage down here will suggest otherwise.
Yeah. Instagram versus reality.
Yeah.
So I got it for free. My granddad gave it to me, and I started working on it, like literally teaching myself how to work on cars. I'd never really worked on cars before, and little did I know I was massively out of my depth. You got to start somewhere. So I bought another engine to go into it. I think I paid 30 quid for it, for another 1.3 8-valve carb that it would have had originally. And I put that into it. I just about got it running. I started it up. It was sort of running on 3 cylinders. A bit of tweaking later with the spark plugs and gapping them and whatever. I finally got it to run on 4. But I had a little bit of an issue with it in that it had a stuck valve. So kind of purely in frustration or whatever, I tore it back out again and tore the engine down and found this problem. And it was about that time that I went off to uni. So the SJ sat at my parents' in a shed, kind of gathering dust for like another few years while I was away at uni. Didn't have any money, was away in Cardiff, and never really had the time to work on it. So it sat there till I graduated. Then when I started my job over in Warwickshire, I moved it over there after about 6 months or so. And started working on it a bit. Never really got into it because at the time it had gotten quite rusty, I suppose. So it needed quite a lot of welding at that point, and I wasn't able to weld at that point. Didn't have a welder, and yeah, it kind of got pushed into the corner of the workshop, and other projects came along as they very often do. Started tinkering with the daily, and then buying other cars, and it just started gathering even more dust and whatever. Basically, until the point where I think it was about 2 years ago or so. A friend of mine, Chris, that I met through this online video game, Insane, which is a kind of 4x4 off-roading game, and we'd stayed in contact ever since. because we're both into 4x4s. He said, right, I'm coming to visit. He's from Scotland. He came all the way down for the weekend, and we took the engine from the Vitara that I had and we dropped it in. We actually got it running very rough and ready off a jerry can and went, right, yeah, that's it. And then that was the first time it sprung into life.
Okay.
Cool.
These might be pretty tight.
Wow, you have to have tiny hips for that.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Oh. So we can talk about modifications to the Suzuki.
Yeah, so I've done quite a bit to it now. Probably, obviously, the first thing that we're talking about is the Vitara engine, which gives it a bit more pep. Nice and reliable. Starts first time every time, which is brilliant. The other main thing that really needed doing to get it back on the road was the bodywork. Being an old Japanese 4x4, although it was a relatively good one, it still had quite a lot of rust. So, like many things, I like to use that as an opportunity for some modifications. So, I basically bought a set of 31-inch tyres that I built the car around, and the philosophy was with it to keep it quite low to the ground, quite stable. They have a bit of a reputation for falling over, so a lot of people like to put big lifts on them and make them look cool, but I didn't really quite want that. Yeah, you're just more likely to tip over. Yeah, I didn't really fancy tipping it over because it's super thin steelwork and it'd be like having an accident in a bean can. So I don't really fancy that.
Yes, there's no airbags.
No, no, you are the crumple zone.
Yep.
So a lot of people, to fit 31-inch tyres, put the springs over the top of the axle, and that gives you like 5 or 6 inches of lift, which is quite a lot, just to clear the bodywork with the tyres. But mine is actually on standard suspension on the rear, nice healthy standard suspension, and on the front it has about a 2-inch lift to compensate for the weight of the engine to just level it out. So, but most of the clearance for the bigger tyres comes from something that people call a virtual lift or a mini tubbing. So effectively, where the steel inner arch of the SJ comes and then it tapers down to the outer arch, there's a curve there. And what I've done is actually cut straight across around the outer arch, radiused it much larger, and then welded a band of steel into the gap. So you don't end up with any lip around the outside. Your inner arch just comes straight out and is flat to the curve of the outer arch, and that actually gives you a lot more room to fit the bigger tyres and clear them while the axles are kind of articulating around. But it means you can keep the car low to the ground, but still end up with more ground clearance underneath because you fit the bigger tyres. So it's a kind of, I feel like it's the best way to do it, and that's the way I wanted to go about it.
So here we are, we're green laning again back to the way we came, out of pure necessity because the main road is actually closed. This is the only way to get from the village we've driven to back to the village we came from. So who said green lanes are not useful?
Yeah. You're right.
Best thing is, in this video, the sky looks nice and blue. If you look, I've buggered up that bloody gimbal now. Yeah. Over here, less so.
Trying to do too much gimbaling.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this video, do please like, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching. You can also now follow us on all the usual social media things.